first thing I saw was the flash of a silver badge inches from my face while wet chlorine still clung to my hands and the sun burned the back of my neck. And all I could think was how surreal it felt that a man claiming to be a cop was standing inside our HOA pool cage demanding my keys like he owned the place, before I even had time to ask what planet he came from. So let me say this first, before we dive in. Comment which country you're watching from because this story still doesn't feel real even as I relive it. And if you've ever had a run-in with entitlement like this, you'll know the sick twist in your gut that tells you something is about to go very wrong. I'd gone to the pool early that day because mornings were my quiet time, when the echo of splashing water bounced gently off the tiled walls and the smell of sunscreen mixed with fresh-cut hedges, the kind of peaceful routine you protect fiercely when your work life is chaos. And I was halfway through counting laps when I noticed a woman in oversized sunglasses standing at the gate with her arms folded so tightly her knuckles were white, already radiating that unmistakable energy of someone preparing to assert imaginary dominance. She watched me like I was trespassing on her throne, lips pursed, tapping the metal gate with her acrylic nails until the sound irritated even the birds perched above. And when I finally climbed out and reached for my towel, she snapped, loud and shrill, "You don't belong here," as if the pool suddenly had lineage bloodlines and I was a peasant daring to bathe with the royals. I calmly explained that I lived in the complex, pointing toward my building just beyond the manicured hedges, but she scoffed and stepped closer as though proximity itself might create authority, snapping back that she was on the HOA board and she'd never seen me before, so obviously I was either sneaking in or using someone's pass, her voice carrying enough volume that two elderly neighbors paused mid-walk along the path to listen. I reminded her that faces change and people work odd hours, that familiarity was not a prerequisite for residency, but she dismissed every word as a lie, leaning closer until I could smell her perfume, a sharp synthetic floral clouding the air, and said with a grin that made my skin crawl, "I'll just call my husband, he's a cop, and we'll let him sort you out." 5 minutes later, the unmistakable sound of boots on concrete announced the arrival of the star of her production, a tall man with mirrored sunglasses and an oversized tactical vest strutting through the gate like he'd been called to apprehend a fugitive rather than check a minor HOA complaint, while his wife dramatically stepped aside like a stage manager cueing the villain's entrance. He didn't greet me, didn't ask a single clarifying question, just flashed his badge and said, "Pool keys." "Now," his tone sharp and practiced, and I remember thinking how strange it was that he jumped straight to demand without verifying anything, ignoring my ID card clipped to my bag and the property rules posted right behind him. I asked for his name and badge number, standard procedure for anyone making official demands, but he sneered and said I was already getting one break for not being in cuffs, which earned murmurs from the growing cluster of neighbors now edging closer, their voices hushed but buzzing with curiosity as phones quietly came out. His wife crossed her arms triumphantly, eyes glittering like she'd already won, and said loudly, "See, I told you we don't allow freeloaders here," while the so-called officer reached toward my bag like he intended to seize it, an instinct kicked in hard enough to jolt through my chest. I told him firmly that unless he had legal grounds he should step back immediately, but he leaned in close, breath-hot, cheap coffee on his teeth, whispering that he didn't need permission to police public spaces, and that whisper more than anything sent the warning sirens screaming in my skull because nothing he was doing matched legitimate protocol. I could feel the intuitive click of professional alarm bells, posture wrong, approach wrong, phrasing wrong, and as I slowly raised my hands to keep the situation calm, I scanned the crowd, noticing the tense expressions of bystanders uncertain whether to intervene or film, while the man stepped forward again, fingers grazing the zipper of my bag like he was testing just how far intimidation could carry him. I remembered the countless briefings drilled into me over the years: stay composed, let the threat hang itself, as I met his eyes and held dead still, the sun glaring off his sunglasses while his wife narratively fueled the tension by telling everyone within earshot how criminals always play innocent, her voice rising theatrically as if the louder she spoke the more real her accusations became. I calmly stated, louder now so the crowd could hear, "Sir, you are impersonating law enforcement and that is a felony." And there was a microsecond where everything stalled, the birds chirped, water dripped from my fingertips, the spectators froze before he barked out a forced laugh that sounded more defensive than confident. He snapped back that I'd chosen the wrong guy to mess with, that I had no idea who he was, and he attempted to grab my arm, a move so brazen and illegal that several neighbors gasped audibly, while one older man shouted, "Hey, that's not how police act," sending ripples of validation through the group. I broke contact easily, stepping back and reminding him I was not resisting any lawful order, because none had been given, and that touching me constituted assault, his wife screaming that I was threatening her husband, which made no sense given the visible reality of him lunging toward me. Phones were up everywhere now, tiny red recording dots blinking like warning beacons, and I watched panic flicker behind his mirrored lenses, the bravado cracking under real scrutiny as I asked again for his credentials, this time slowly, deliberately forcing the moment to stretch thin. Instead of answering, he doubled down, raising his voice and declaring he was conducting an investigation, demanding everyone clear back, and attempting to shift the dynamic back under his control, but the neighbors didn't budge, their collective skepticism now outweighing the authority costume he wore. I reached calmly into my bag and felt his wife gasp triumphantly like she expected to catch a weapon or stolen property on camera, but what emerged was my own identification wallet, my federal credentials hidden behind a plain leather exterior, my thumb pausing one last time before I opened it. I still remember how quiet it got as I flipped the wallet open and raised it to eye level, allowing the gold lettering to catch the light, and said evenly, "Before you touch me again, understand I am a federal agent currently working under active duty assignment." The man froze mid-step, face draining visibly even through the tinted glasses, while his wife blinked rapidly repeating, "That's fake," under her breath like a mantra trying to ward off reality, the crowd leaning forward as one to see the badge more clearly. I asked the man to identify himself again, asked where he was stationed, and which precinct he worked under, simple questions any legitimate officer could answer instantly. But he stammered, refusing to remove his sunglasses now as sweat began tracing lines down his cheeks. The tension twisted into nausea as I continued, stating loudly that I would be calling local law enforcement to verify his claims, because impersonation was no joke and detaining a federal operative was a catastrophic legal boundary crossing, his wife suddenly shifting tone, laughing awkwardly and insisting this was all just a misunderstanding. He attempted to walk backward out of the pool area, muttering that he didn't have to explain anything, but the neighbors instinctively stepped forward, blocking his exit like an improvised human barricade fueled by pure moral outrage and adrenaline. I could hear trembling rage in his wife's voice as she screamed for people to move, calling them nosy idiots and threatening lawsuits, while he desperately tapped something into his phone like he hoped a fabricated backup narrative might still exist if he typed hard enough. I dialed non-emergency dispatch on speaker so the entire crowd could hear, calmly reporting a suspected impersonation at our address with a male suspect and a witness who had instigated the confrontation. And when the dispatcher requested his name for record verification, he went dead silent, jaw clenched hard enough that the muscles twitched beneath his skin. Within 8 minutes the sound of real sirens approached, slicing through the now dense silence hanging over the pool deck like static electricity. And when 2 legitimate patrol vehicles rolled in, the would-be officer visibly sagged as uniformed professionals stepped out, radiating actual authority that contrasted sharply with his earlier posturing. I briefed them calmly while maintaining visual contact with the suspect, presenting my credentials again for verification, and the lead officer nodded once before turning to the man and asking for his ID, department affiliation, and reason for the civilian detention attempt, a question that landed like a hammer. The man attempted weak deflection, saying his badge must have been left at home, but the officers weren't amused. They separated him from his wife immediately, one gently escorting her aside while another planted firm feet in front of him, repeating the request with colder emphasis. Finally cornered by real accountability, he admitted he wasn't law enforcement at all, just married to someone who hates rule breakers. A confession that lit the air with shocked murmurs, his wife shrieking denial until officers calmly informed her that impersonating an officer and facilitating unlawful detention could lead to felony charges. Neighbors audibly gasped as handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, the metallic snap echoing louder than any shout earlier, while his wife launched into hysterics, screaming that this ruin was my fault, that I had tricked them, that normal people don't carry FBI badges, which only further ratified how detached from reality she truly was. I watched dispassionately as officers placed her in cuffs moments later after continued obstruction and verbal threats, the adrenaline ebbing now replaced by that cold post-incident tremor you never quite outrun no matter how seasoned you become. Several neighbors approached quietly afterward thanking me, apologizing for not stepping in sooner, and I reassured them that collective presence mattered more than heroics. The truth always surfaces when witnesses stand firm. The HOA issued a public notice days later terminating her board position immediately, citing criminal misconduct, and multiple residents reached out sharing similar intimidation stories they'd previously been too afraid to report, triggering a larger internal investigation that cleaned house completely over the following months. I returned to the pool one peaceful sunrise weeks later, the same chlorine smell in the air, the same birds perched above, but the space felt safer now, lighter somehow, as if truth itself had lifted a weight off the community roofline. Before diving in, I paused and thought about how authority means nothing without integrity, how costume confidence collapses the second it meets real accountability, and how even the loudest entitlement can't outshout reality forever. So if this story hit close to home, remember, question fake power, protect your rights, and never underestimate the strength of staying calm when chaos tries to control the narrative. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share so more people learn that truth always carries the final badge.